So, good morning, friends. Today we are here in another lecture of human resource management, and this is the class for Master in Business Administration, second semester students. And the subject is human resource management. And in the last class, when we were discussing about industrial discipline, we have also started with this topic of code of conduct, right? So we have done a bit of it. Now we will move forward in this, right? Now, coming down to the objectives of the code, so let's see what are the objectives of the code. Right, the code of discipline has to achieve certain objective. It has certain predetermined objectives which are supposed to be achieved by the code of discipline, and these objectives may be summarized as the right. The first objective is maintaining peace and order in the industry. The primary objective of code of conduct is to maintain peace and harmony in the industry. Right. Now, promoting if we talk about maintaining peace and order in industry, we have to understand that we have to promote constructive criticism at all levels of management and employment, right? Constructive criticism should not be opposed. If the criticism is done to pin down somebody, then it's a destructive criticism. But if criticism is made in order to construct something, or it is done in a constructive manner, it is done with good intention, then it's a constructive criticism. So constructive criticism should not be barred. Constructive criticism should not be condemned. Constructive criticism should not be threatened with coercion, right? Because criticism is very important. Unless and until you criticize anything or you critically evaluate anything, how will you improve it? So constructive criticism at all levels of management is very important, right? This is the second point. The third point is avoiding the stoppages of work, right? If there are stoppages of work in the industry, then it will be dangerous both for the employers as well as for the employees. So work stoppages should not be there as far as possible, right? To the best of your knowledge and efforts, you should be aimed at not stopping the work. Rather, you should be getting your problems rectified without stopping the work, because stopping the work will be painful for both the management and also for the workers. Now, fourth point is securing the settlement of the dispute and grievances by mutually aggrieved procedures and avoiding litigations, right? You have to set your dispute settled with the proper machinery which is provided in order to settle that dispute, and you should try to reach at the mutual agreement at the earliest so that the work may not get hampered, right? Now, fifth point is facilitating a free growth of trade union. You should allow trade union to grow as a management. You should not be opposing the growth of the trade union. You should not be taking trade union as a challenge for you. Rather, you should be taking trade union in a positive manner and should permit their growth in your industry. Now, coming down to the next point, which is perhaps the sixth point among the objectives of the code of conduct, is bringing homes to the employees and management the importance of their recognition of one another rights and responsibilities. Both the management and the workers should pay due recognition to the rights and responsibilities of each other. Both have certain rights and both have certain responsibilities which need to be discharged on part of both of these parties, that is the workers and the management. Next is your seventh: eliminating all forms of coercion, intimidation, and violation of rules, regulations, and procedures as governing the industrial relation. Right? All such things: coercion, intimidation, violation of rules, regulations, procedures governing industrial relations should be avoided. No such kind of thing should be done on part of workers or on part of management in order to avoid any problem that may affect industrial harmony in that organization, right? Now, moving further, features of the code of discipline, right? What are the prominent features of the code of discipline? We will find them out, right? The code of discipline is applicable not only in the public sector unit but also on the private sector unit equally, right? And code of discipline is equally applicable on the private sector like it is applicable on the public sector. So the features, the broad features of the code of, hello, I believe some disturbance is coming. Please mute your audio, and please let me know my audio and video is clear to all of you. Hello.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now coming down to the features of code of discipline, right? Number one, if we talk about, it prohibits strikes and lockouts without prior notice and also intimidation, victimization, and the adoption of go slow policy by the workers, right? Code of discipline says that any kind of unauthorized strike or any kind of work slowdown will not be permissible in any case. If you have any problem, get the problem, or if you have any dispute, get the dispute rectified with using the dispute redressal machinery as provided by the law, right? If you are going to follow this go slow tactics or something like strikes and all without prior notice, yes, you can go for strike. A strike is your right, you can go for a strike, but before going on strike you have to give a prior notice that we are going on strike from so and so date, right? You have to give a certain amount of time before going to strike, right? You have to, otherwise your strike will be illegal. Second feature, no one outside or no, the second point talks about unilateral actions cannot be taken by either parties in any industrial relation matter. Unilateral decisions may not be permissible in an industrial relation matter. In any matters relating to the industrial relation, the decisions cannot be unilateral. Both the parties who are the parties concerned should be involved in any such kind of decisions, right? Now coming down to the next, all disputes are to be settled through the existing dispute settlement machinery as provided by the law, right? All these disputes should be subjected to the dispute redressal machinery as provided by the law. No dispute should be solved in any other, through any other manner, right? Whatever procedure has been provided by the law, you have to abide with it, right? Now coming down to the next point, it talks about the fact that the employer will not increase workload without prior agreement with the workers. It is nothing like that you keep on increasing the workload on the workers. No, nothing like that. If you want to increase the workload, you have to speak with the workers. You have to enter into an agreement with the workers that yes, are you agree to get your workload increased? If they give their consent for that particular agreement, then only you can do. Otherwise it is nothing like that, that you keep on increasing the work of the workers and overloading them with work. This cannot be done in any case. Next point talks about common grievance procedure for the settlement of grievance of the workers, right? Under which investigation need to be done for that particular grievance in order to find out the reason for that grievance, and then necessary actions should be taken in order to resolve that grievance, so that the grievance on part of the workers may be resolved at the right time and there may not be any discontent on part of the workers. Now next point talks about the fact that employees should provide all facilities for the growth of the trade union. The employer should not be prohibiting the growth of trade union in their establishments, right? Next point is your prompt actions. Next point talks about prompt actions. Prompt actions against what? Prompt action against officers whose conduct is into indiscipline among the workers. Prompt action means immediate action should be taken on any such officer who is instigating the workers to breach the discipline, right? This act will be considered as totally the act of indiscipline, and immediate disciplinary action will be initiated against such officer without his designation or post, right? Now moving down to the next point, it talks about the fact that workers should not be any such trade union activities. Any worker should not involved in the trade union activity during the working hours. Working hour are the hours in which the workers should work and not to get into the job of the trade union. During the working hour, your responsibility is to take care of the duties and responsibilities which have been assigned to you, and thereafter you can go for the activities of the trade union, but not before that, right? You should not be engaging in yourself in any demonstration activity which is not peaceful. All the demonstration should be peaceful and strictly into the provisions of law. If you are getting into any kind of demonstration which is not peaceful and violating the provisions of law, then legal actions may be initiated against you immediately at that point of time, and you will be subjected to legal consequences, right? Ninth point, the workers should implement their part of award and settlement promptly the disputes. Or now what this point says that the workers should implement their part of award and settlements promptly, and will take actions against those office bearers or the unions who have violated the code, right? Any kind of decision which has been taken or any settlement which has to be done should be implemented immediately, and even those office bearers of the trade union who are violating any rules and regulation which are so established in consent with the management and the workers should be penalized or punished for doing the same, right? 10th point talks about the fact that unions should discourage negligence of duty, careless operation, damage to property, and insubordination, and any kind of disturbance in normal productivity, right? Right, union, it is necessary for the union, it is job of the union to discourage negligence of duties, right? You, if any such union member is there who is negligent in duties, union should not be standing with that particular employee, because negligence of duty is totally an offense, and he should not be doing that. He cannot neglect his duties, because he is being paid for this year. He is being paid for his duties. How can he dare to neglect his duties, right? Now if he is careless in his operations, I mean, he is not careful in his work, he is not doing his work properly, then too union should not be defending such kind of workers, because he need to careful in his operations. And if some worker is causing damage to the property, it is a serious offense, he should be penalized, and union should not be supporting such worker who is causing damage to the factory premises, right? Insubordination means not obeying the order of bosses. This is what insubordination is. If any worker is indulging in subordination kind of activities, then he should be taken care of seriously by the trade union people, and he should not be permitted to do so, right? Or he is creating disturbance in normal productive activities, this is also an offense on part of the workers, and trade union should not be defending such kind of worker who is doing any such kind of activities, right? So union should be discouraging unfair labor practices and should not engage in any kind of rowdy demonstrations against the management, because these kind of demonstrations are totally prohibited by the law. Now coming down to the next slide, which talks about content of the code of discipline. What are the contents, or what are the broad contents of the code of discipline, right? Code of discipline contains basically three principles. Code of disciplines involves three basic principles. What are those three basic principles? The first principles applies to both management and unions. It makes the first set of principles applies both on management and unions, right? It makes it compulsory to management and union to comply with the existing dispute settle machinery to settle all their dispute, grievances, and all different things that are happening. The first principle, the first set of principles is applicable to both management and workers, and the first set of principles says that there is a dispute settlement machinery, and management and workers both of them should get all their disputes and grievance redressed with that dispute redressal machinery by mutual negotiation, conciliation, and voluntary arbitration. Right? Okay, these are the three methods by which they can get their dispute settled: by mutual negotiation, conciliation, and voluntary arbitration. Right? To give up coercion, victimization, work stoppages, lockouts, litigations, and to establish grievance procedures. Right? These may be some of the problems like you have seen. Right? What were the problems that it talks about? Right? First, the three procedures, and what are the disputes particularly. These differences may be in the form of differences, these may be in the form of grievances. Right? These disputes may be in form of victimization, coercion, work stoppages, lockouts, litigations, etc. These are some of the problems that the laborers might be having, and they can get it rectified, they can get it resorted, they can search for justice by following the dispute redressal machinery mechanism as provided by the government of India. Right? Now, moving further, the second set of principles includes obligations to be observed by management. The second set of principles contains certain responsibilities that are supposed to be adhered to by the management. These responsibilities or obligations are on part of management, as the second set of principles says. Right? It says that management should not increase the workload of the workers unless and until they have discussed the same with the workers and managed to get the consent of the worker, managed to get the free consent of the workers. Free consent means workers should not be threatened with punishment in order to obtain their consent. The workers should be giving their consent without any pressure. Right? Here, management should also settle grievance promptly, rightly, and implement the settlement immediately and allow appeal in all cases. If the employee is having certain dispute, then the management should respond quickly in terms of that dispute and should settle the dispute at the earliest. And whatever settlement or whatever agreement reaches in between the workers and the management, that agreement or that those conditions should be implemented at the earliest without any delay, because justice delayed is justice denied. Right? So they should implement the settlement and award at the earliest, and if still the worker is not satisfied and want to appeal to some higher authority, the worker should be permitted to appeal, because it is the right of the worker to appeal against any decision for which the worker is not satisfied. It happens in many of the time, so workers should be having the chances to appeal against the decision. Further, management have to recognize the union according to the code of conduct. Code of conduct has also terms and conditions in connection to that management, which union management should be recognizing and which union management should not be recognizing. Right? So there are, broadly speaking, three kinds of union. One is the three forms of unions are there. I believe trade union is not in your syllabus. Three forms of unions are there particularly. One is the qualified union, which is having at least 5% members. The another one is the representative union. Just like that, three types of unions are there. So it is in the code of conduct that which union management will be recognizing and which not. The criteria which is laid down by the code mentions which union will be recognized as per the code of conduct and which union should not. Right? In case if there are more than one union in an organization, in that case management should be recognizing that union which is more than 1 year old and which is supposed to be the largest union of that organization. Right? Like there are three unions, so management should be recognizing that union which is having the maximum number of members. So that union should be recognized by the member as the union with which management will be negotiating. Now, union may claim recognition as a representative of all the unions, right? Representative, like I said, they are a qualified union. Any such union which is having 5% of the workers as its member will known as qualified union, right? Which is the qualified union? Any union which is having 5% of the total workers as its members will be known as qualified union. In the similar manner, any union which is having at least 25% of the workers of that organization as its members will be known as representative union, right? But if any plant union have 50% workers as its members, it may represent its member in all the matters relating to grievances, working hours, etc., right? So if any union if having 50% of the workers, then it will be the biggest union. Then in any case like of grievance, working hours, etc., it may represent the worker very easily because 50% of the total strength of workers are its members. So it becomes very easier for such a union to represent the interest of the workers. Moving further, now the third and final set of principles includes obligations for the trade union. Like first set of principles includes the set of obligations for workers and management. The second set of principles includes the obligations for management, and the third set of principles includes the obligations for the trade union people. I hope I am audible to all of you. Anybody please respond in yes or no.
Yes, sir.
All right, fine. So let's get into the third and final set of principles. It says that union should not be engaged in any kind of rowdy activities or any activities which is involving coercion. Rather, it should be into peaceful demonstration, and it should be putting up its demands in the manner as prescribed by the law. It should not be going against the provision, against in any such activity that may defeat the provisions of law, right? There should not be any union activities during working hours unless it is permitted by the law or an agreement in between the workers and the management. When the working hours is there should not be any union activity unless and until either it is permitted by law or it is permitted by the authorities of that particular organization, right? Such practices like negligence of duties, careless operation, damage or to property, interference with work should be discouraged. These practices are not acceptable in any case, and these practices should not take place whenever work is going on during the in the industrial premises, right? Now, settlements and awards should be implemented at the earliest, and members of the union should not violate the code of discipline. And if union member, if office bearers of the union are violating the code of discipline, then they should also be subjected to disciplinary procedure in any case, instead of the fact that they are office bearers of the trade union, right? It does not matter in that case. Now, code of discipline is an important step in order to establish industrial peace in an industrial unit. It creates an positive atmosphere and avoid things like stoppages of work and create cordial relationship in between the management and the workers, right? But the actual contribution of code of discipline is that the actual the actual contribution of code of discipline is that it decrease the number of indisciplinary activities in the organization, right? Now, the reasons, what can be the reasons behind it? The reasons behind it are given by National Commission on Labor. And what were these reasons? Number one, the absence of genuine desire for limited support to the code on part of the employers and workers. ठीक है. The second point, state of indiscipline in the body politics, right? Now, the National Commission on Labor recommended certain provisions of the code should be made statutory in case of industrial discipline, right? The first is recognition of the representative union as the sole bargaining agent, right? Representative union should be the only bargaining agent for the workers. If one representative union is only the bargaining agent for the workers, then it may be able to bargain more effectively for the workers with full pressure and support, right? And it may be able to exert more pressure on the management as compared to a weaker union or as compared to multiple unions, right? The second point, setting up of a grievance machinery, right? A proper grievance machinery for the redressal of grievance in the industrial organization should be set up as per the provisions of the Industrial Dispute Act, right? In such case, what will happen? In such case, all the grievances will be taken care of at the right point of time and will get settled immediately. Third point, prohibition of strikes and lockouts without proper notice. You cannot go for any kind of strike or you cannot go for any kind of lockout before providing or serving a proper notice to each other. Otherwise, all the strikes and all those kind of lockouts will be illegal in eyes of law, right? Fourth point, penalties for unfair labor practices. If the management or the workers are found to be indulged in any kind of unfair labor practices, then disciplinary action may be initiated or legal action may be initiated against them and penalty may be imposed as permitted by the law against them. Now, fifth point, provision for voluntary arbitration. What is voluntary arbitration? Two parties are there in a dispute and they are unable to settle down the dispute. Then, with the consent of each other, they may invite a third party to intervene in between the dispute and get their dispute settled, right? So this is what we call as arbitration. So this is all about the code of discipline today.